Okay. On behalf of the Chairman and the Board of Directors of the Employers Consultative Association and its subsidiary, the Employer Solutions Center, I wish to thank the THA, the Finance Division, for this opportunity to address you on the topic of examining productivity in Trinidad and Tobago. In 2013, the Tobago House of Assembly launched its CEDP, and we heard about that this morning, a policy which focuses on sustainable development in Trinidad and Tobago. And at the heart of it is diversification, preservation of the environment, and of course, a better standard of living for its people. Its goal is to transform, it speaks about transforming and diversifying the Tobago economy such that it is better able to adjust to rapid changes in the national and international economies by the products and services which would retain a competitive edge. And of course, as any good plan would, it identifies 7 or 8 strategic priority areas, and each division of the THA would play a leading role in implementing the stated objectives. On the implementation side, we heard this morning as well, a lot of what I'm saying I've heard this morning, so I think that's good. There is synchronization without even planning it. So a recent example of the productive outcome, we heard about the efforts of the division to showcase and market the Tobago's artistic talent. The division supported 4 Tobago designers, and they went to the Fashion World Tokyo, which is the largest fashion trade show. So they were linking the Tobago producers with the global marketplace, and of course, this is a step in the right direction. And so we see evidence of 2 critical elements, which is the macro planning that is necessary, and of course the successful implementation of programs and initiatives which expose our national businesses and entrepreneurs on the global stage. So we have the strategic planning and we have the implementation. And so I'm asking the question, why are we battling what is being described in Trinidad and Tobago as a severe case of low productivity? And further, why should we even be concerned? So I would want to begin with a definition of productivity, and I know all of us know what productivity is. The ECA uses the definition as a measure of efficiency of a person, machine, factory, systems, etc., as we convert the inputs into useful outputs. And of course, we computed by dividing the average output per period by the total cost incurred or consumed in that period. So we have productivity at the level of the firm, which is describing the output of the worker, the department or the company, and then we have productivity at the national level, and of course we talk about the GDP per capita, per person employed, or per hours worked. So improved productivity means we're talking about higher wages without inflation, right? So there's little or no price increase in the product or service. And then improved productivity also points to our economy's ability to create real wealth and therefore impacting positively on the quality of life of our citizens. So why this conference? Again, I ask. Life is good. Christmas has not been abolished as far as I know, and by the way, it's 6 weeks away. And Carnival is on stream for February. So why bother with productivity? I wish to share a very interesting frog parable, and we seem to be talking about animals as well and comparing ourselves. Frog parable, which I came across and which I think illustrates the reason that we must be interested in examining and understanding the issues relating to productivity, the problem, and also committing ourselves to doing something in terms of implementing effective solutions. So the parable of the boiled frog. If you place a frog in a pot of boiling water, it will immediately try to scramble out. But if you place the frog in room temperature water and you don't scare him, he will remain put. Now, if the pot sits on a heat source, and if you gradually turn up the temperature, something very interesting happens. As the temperature rises, the frog will do nothing. In fact, he may show every sign of enjoying himself. As the temperature gradually increases, the frog becomes groggier and groggier until he's unable to climb out of the pot. And though there is nothing restraining him, the frog will sit there and boil. And why? It's because the frog's internal apparatus for sensing threats to survival is geared to sudden changes in the environment, not to slow, gradual changes. The Employers Consultative Association believes that a key survival strategy for us in Trinidad and Tobago is to identify the slow, gradual processes that often pose the greatest threat and take deliberate and calculated actions to meaningfully addressing them. And so I just want to look briefly at the labor shortage and productivity issue, absenteeism and its impact on productivity, economic growth and competitiveness, and some other key barriers to productivity, and of course the issue of creating an enabling environment. In terms of the labor productivity, one of the central issues, we hear about the good old Trinbago partying mentality, and of course the ducking work culture. And I think this is one of the key hindrances to detecting the change in temperature while the heat on the water is increasing. As far back as 1962, in his Independence Day message, and not sure how many of you all would remember it, but the first Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Eric Williams, he hinted at this labor productivity issue. In his statement, he said, and I quote, "Slacking on the job jeopardizes the national income, inflates cost, and merely sets a bad example. The medieval churchmen had a saying that to work is to pray," and I am thinking of my predecessor who just spoke about the importance of praying. Dr. Eric Williams' statement, even back then, highlighted the link between the labor productivity and our national economy. And yet, 53 years later, we are still grappling with the issue of labor productivity and the importance of the development of our society. The equating working to praying, it hints at an intrinsic element of work, its sacred nature. Just as a thought, if we could only embrace this concept of work being akin to praying, then the reverence, seriousness, and discipline that is applied to prayer will be duplicated in work, thus redounding to greater levels of productivity. As we enter this 2015 period in Trinidad and Tobago, littered with the whole issues of recession, it is crystal clear to us and from our membership feedback that there is a serious issue with the labor force, and it is impacting negatively on our economy. Just over the weekend, if you all read the national newspapers, we heard pleas from two local food initiatives, and one was Mr. Joe Perez and his UPIC Farm Business Initiative, an investment of about $2 million in the Chagaramas area. And it is being severely hampered as a result of labor shortage at the time of reaping, which is a critical time, which means that products are going to be lost. Okay? And even in terms of sowing, he was only able to plant 40 out of the 100 acres of land which he has used. And the reason that he cited was the lack of workers. In Plummeton, the rice fields, we heard the farmers again crying out for sustainable labor. And the sad thing is that both initiatives relate to food. And we know that we are talking about impacting this $4 billion annual food import bill that we have. And of course, we heard this morning the goal of achieving food security. So it is a critical state. Based on our experience with working with business organizations at the ECA, an important question for us was, how could we effectively enhance some of the current labor pools in programs such as the CPEP, and we heard mention of that this morning. In the case of CPEP, we must address the problem, we think, from the head. CPEP, for example, is an entrepreneurial initiative, and it gives contracts to small businesses. So are we strengthening those businesses in order to produce? The ECA advocates that honest consultation with the owners and entrepreneurs of the CPEP businesses and comprehensive training of their workers positive reinforcement is a solution that can provide greater effectiveness of this program. These are critical tools for inculcating, and we're talking about inculcating the right culture and attitudes in the workplace. If these CPEP workers or stakeholders are of the belief that their program is just a welfare or handout program, then little pride and value and esteem would be perpetrated, and the general haphazard, lackadaisical attitude that we see sometimes, it will persist. But show them the link between the work they do, the outcome, and the impact on the society. And as those values and the worth is ingrained in the jobs and communicated to them, we believe that there can be some positive transformation. And the cost of not creatively addressing these labor shortages far exceed the cost of any incentives that you would need to devise for such programs. More recently, in October this year, the new Minister of Labor and Small Enterprise Development, the Honorable Jennifer Baptiste-Primus, speaking on the issue of productivity in a meeting with the ECA, she reinforced the need for a focused attention to be placed on the macro elements affecting productivity. The minister recognized, and I heard my Barbados counterpart talking about the need to establish a mechanism to link wages and wage increases with productivity in Trinidad and Tobago. The minister indicated that comprehensive studies will be undertaken to ascertain the impact of factors. And this area is really important. The factors such as traffic on punctuality, absenteeism, and wellness affecting the national productivity. Absenteeism has been described by many of our businesses as a cancer of productivity. So even as I'm sharing this data, I'm doing so in the context of understanding some of the infrastructural challenges that are currently facing our employees. And I know it's the same in Tobago as it is in Trinidad. We are talking about single parent, littering of our country with single parents, and their need to spend quality time with their children, they work long hours, etc. And of course, the absence of the family support. Dr. Keith Nurse, the WTO chair at our recent conference, he highlighted illness, stress, poor relationships with supervisors and co-workers as major factors that people identified as the reasons for absenteeism. The fact is that the high level of absenteeism being experienced in both the private and the public sector is worrisome, but it points to some deeper underlying issues in our workplaces. Despite the myriad of advances in technology and communication systems, and I think we are now at Windows 10.0, we appear to only be succeeding in cultivating poor relationships. So while our operating systems are advanced, the version of the human application and communication is still at version 1.0. Capacity is present, but the underutilization and, of course, the benefits are unrealized. In addition, we are seeing an increasing number of cases, OSH cases, health and safety, in the workplace, both in private and the public sector, and we are actually witnessing increases in the judgments in favor of workers, implying that for the employers, we need to take a closer look at the health and safety matters in our workplaces. In our recent ECA survey, which was done in September, I believe, absenteeism due to ill health has ranked as the #1 cause of absenteeism. And while this is ostensibly the reason that is given by employees, employers are generally of the view that sick leave is being abused and requested by employees due to that entitlement mentality and not necessarily because the employee is ill. Nonetheless, the fact is that there continues to be high level of illness in the form of lifestyle and non-communicable diseases, and the appropriate research needs to be done to determine the actual extent and level of the problem. In the meantime, what we advise and encourage employers to do is to actively pursue and implement wellness strategies in their workplaces as a response to genuine increased levels of illnesses that are being estimated in the workplace. We know that the GDP in Trinidad and Tobago contracted, and I'm looking at the political, economic, and competitiveness state now. The gross domestic product in Trinidad and Tobago contracted 1.7% in the first quarter of 2015 over the same previous year. GDP growth rates in Trinidad and Tobago averaged 3.67 between 1991 until 2015, reaching an all-time high of 20.6, and then going down to minus 20%, minus 6.20% in the quarter of 2009. This is information from the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago. Our new political regime has signaled commitment to reform and to addressing issues of equity, transparency, governance, and better quality of life. In his maiden speech, budget speech, the finance minister, he spoke about the government values of impartiality, transparency, sincerity of government, equity, and prosperity for all. These are laudable goals, and they can be tied to the overall objective of productivity, improving productivity in the nation. However, when we look at the global report card on competitiveness, in 2012, the World Economic Forum, we were ranked 81st out of 142 economies, an improvement from 84th in 2011. What have we seen in the last 2 years? We are now positioned at 89 out of 140 countries. This position has remained constant, and it's confirming a stagnation or receding state of affairs, because if there's no improvement over time, then there is, in fact, a deterioration, talking about opportunity costs, etc. In the recent past, we have witnessed the challenges that Tobago has faced, the scourge of crime, which unfortunately have been infiltrating too many of our peaceful community. And these are real issues that we have to deal with as threats to the economic growth in the island, especially since for the last 3 years, we have not seen economic growth. Over the years, though, there have been several initiatives implemented by successive governments to create the framework which would be as an attempt to create more productive businesses and economy. And so we heard earlier about the tripartism, social dialogue. These were all mechanisms to stimulate more harmonious interaction among key social partners and IR players in our nation. We saw implementation of universal education, GATE, internship, etc. Yet despite all these mechanisms, we still continue to talk and experience what we see as a mismatch of essential skill sets and resources which are required in order to achieve the true economic development and productivity. Some of the key barriers which I just want to highlight to high productivity levels in Trinidad and Tobago. Based on the data shared at our recent conference on absenteeism, one of the things that we continue to see is that the prominent issues are well within the control of management. So we point our fingers, we point one finger at them and we point 3 at us. Poor management and leadership. We talk about indecisive leaders who are reluctant to make the hard decisions. So a worker is constantly, for example, absent from work, and the employer is reluctant to take the necessary and recommended action. Whose fault is that? Not practicing desired behaviors. It is a case of follow the leader. So if as management you are unable or you are unwilling to do what is right, what do you expect the employees to do? We saw as well as barriers to the high level of productivities, poor human resource management, little or no succession planning and retention strategies in organizations. A very important one was the limited engagement and motivation of our human resources. Yes, it is what as employers, what we see is the cost side of it, but we do not appreciate the value of engaging our employees. We also have, as a very real situation, the issue of presenteeism. You know, we hear a lot of talk of absenteeism, you do not show up for work, unplanned absences, and all of that. But we also have the issue of presenteeism, which I don't think that anyone has been able yet to determine the mechanism to determine it. But we know that it exists. Employees are present at work, but not very engaged in the work of the organization. Shortage of skills, the local skills in the, and I know in Tobago, our employers are complaining bitterly about this. In fact, one of the entrepreneurs that we know in the food and beverage industry, he has advised me that whenever he has to cater for an upscale event in Tobago, he imports his staff from Trinidad. And of course, he has to meet all their expenses just so that he can satisfy his customers' requirements. The issue, macro issue of core infrastructural issues, now, transportation is a big issue, and we are seeing daily where hours of productive time are being spent unproductively in traffic jams. I know it's very bad in Trinidad, and I also am aware that Tobago is experiencing severe traffic, loss of productivity as a result of traffic. And not only is it you are not present at work in order to complete the work, but we are talking about frazzled attitudes, frazzled minds. You come to work after spending 2 hours in traffic, and you are expected to smile and leave your problems behind, etc. That is very difficult to do. Skills mismatch, right? Employers are complaining they're spending thousands of dollars in training workers, even though they hire them and they're supposed to be employment ready. So we have that very important issue that we have to deal with, and we have to look at and examine. Social media, again, information that was shared with us at the seminar told us that as much as 30% of paid time, the time that we pay our employees, is lost due to social media. So the WhatsApp and the, all the other things that I am, even now I feel very guilty when I go on Facebook. So I am clearly from the old school. So while it is very possible to use the social media in a meaningful way, I don't think that what that 30% we're talking about of the time loss, I don't think that we're talking about productive work, okay? And then we have the issue of, you know, the school dropouts, yet those dropouts have to go into the workplace. So we're talking about a high level of illiteracy, and my figures tell me that in 2012, which was the latest figures published from CXC, 42.8% of students left school without full certificate. So we're talking about out of 23,000 students, 942 students, only 10,248 having a full certificate. And we have to deal with those issues in the workplace because they are coming in, and we have to now deal with them and train them, etc. So in terms of the social and cultural issues, I think other things we want to look at affecting productivity, the increasing amount of females excelling over the males, and I know that is a talked about subject. The increasing presence of youth criminal elements, okay, how are we dealing with that? How are we looking at that? Because that is going to be impacting. In fact, one of the Joe Perez story, one of the things he said was that he actually went to the to ex-convicts to try to get them into the work. But actually what happened was that some of them got picked up on the job by the police because they were still engaged in those nefarious activities. Okay. In terms of the overall productivity issues, so we are reminding ourselves We are looking at how to increase the labor productivity at the national level, sustain productivity and development, and to create the enabling environment. I made mention of the effective bipartite and tripartite mechanism. It is clear that this is not a problem that we can handle in a singular kind of way or isolated way. And my counterpart from Barbados spoke about the relationship with the unions and the employers. And I think that is definitely something that has to feature large. We've seen a shift in the national dialogue from the solely focusing on salaries to include pay for performance and productivity models. The current minister did recognize that, and we know that that is going to be acted upon. One of the macro mechanisms that I think that we need to also look at it re-establishing, and again, mention was made of it when we met with the minister, is the National Productivity Council. And I'm very happy to hear Barbados talk about the effectiveness of that council. We think that that is important for effectively driving the productivity caravan in Trinidad and Tobago, because that body would have a clear and single focus for productivity issues. And would be looking at, of course, innovation, quality of life, etc. And this, of course, is very important for small and medium-sized businesses. Some of the other objectives that would be met by such a council, training in productivity approaches, methodologies, and I mentioned here hosting of conferences, seminars, publication, and national campaigns to promote productivity awareness. And again, I heard that was actually being done in Barbados. So we are eagerly awaiting the reappointment of the National Productivity Council in Trinidad and Tobago. There were just one or two other things that I wanted to highlight. The importance of focusing on the education and training. The European Union and the ILO, they have there is a project that is currently on stream, and the intention of that is really to look at the Caribbean or the CARIFORUM areas, region, and try to look at things that need to be done in order to strengthen these organizations, which would be the employers' organization and also the labor organization. So a lot of discussion is being had on the quality education and training, looking at TVET, the technical vocational type education, and what are some of the things that we need to do to enhance those things so that when these young people come into the workplace, they are camera ready. We know that there are currently some apprenticeship programs, but we really need to look at some of those programs to see how, again, we can enhance those in order to, again, affect productivity in a positive way. I want to talk about the youth unemployment. While figures that are given to us indicate that it's around the vicinity of about 25%, our youth unemployment, we know that we have, Trinidad and Tobago, we have a bunch of really bright young people. They're passionate, they have the energy, etc. And we need to find ways to motivate them and get them, ready for producing effectively in the workplace. And finally, the urgent next steps. I would want to highlight the urgent reactivation of bipartisan and tripartisan mechanisms and the social dialogue committees so that we could set about the work of assiduously developing and implementing strategies for greater consultation and more harmonious engagements and dialogues. Honest evaluation of our current state of being in relation to the World Economic Forum and their report card to us, and the commitment to strengthening the areas where required. articulating and setting a national goal of moving from 89th position to a higher, more advanced position that is more reflective of the wealth and cultural diversity of our people. And widespread articulation and promotion of ownership of the vision by all stakeholders. And I liked what I was hearing from Barbados, because I think they have been able to accomplish some of this. And I have here a commitment to change by all constituents as this vision of superior productivity is ignited and set in full blaze. We must remember that raising productivity is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and therefore having the vision, the will, the passion, endurance are all critical to successful implementation. So what is the challenge? The challenge that we at ECA place before you, and that's each person sitting here. What role will you play in effecting the management and attitude changes required to positively impact productivity in our country? Are you ready to break the bones and the ligaments, etc., at the level of the firms and nationally, so that we can reset them in a mold or in a cast that would allow for proper healing and growth? Are we ready to come out of our comfort zones and apply bitter medicine? And I know Tobago, we could get some good medicine. Apply the bitter medicine to the national wounds. The antidote may be painful, but are absolutely necessary to regain productivity and sustainability of our economy. Trinidad and Tobago must aim to improve all social, environmental, and economic productivities so that our operations are socially equitable, environmentally bearable, and economically viable. We must guard against becoming sidetracked in the short term, basking in lethargy and complacency while swimming in the warm Caribbean waters which gently wash our shores daily. I thank you.